Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about Pakistan's economics, particularly because the budget of Pakistan is going to be presented next month. So we have to actually understand what exactly to expect from the new finance minister. That is not all. There are, if you can see the visuals as well, the new finance minister actually presented or actually submitted to a standing committee and the position, and there he actually pointed out that the strategy paper will be revised, the budget strategy paper. That is not all. He pointed out that if Pakistan doesn't reach 5% growth within a few years, then the situation might be very bleak for the country. This is not all. There are many other aspects which need to be highlighted. One aspect is particularly of concern to Pakistan's foreign partners, particularly IMF, World Bank and all, that is circular debt. Circular debt is one behemoth that actually needs to be controlled. The second important thing is the fiscal deficit itself, because the country is facing a lot of economic hardship and that continues. But the point is that in the past 20 years, Pakistan has barely touched 6-7% growth, and that too twice. That was at the start of this century, not merely the decade or two ago. But we are going to talk about all these matters. Then there is the issue of agriculture policy. We have seen that the country was known for its agricultural produce, and if you remember, there were times when we were called an agriculture-based economy. But since then, it seems that the country's agriculture keeps on tumbling as well, and there might be reasons. There have been past policies which were not that much great, but this government seems to be focusing on this matter, especially looking at the well-being and the interest of the agriculture sector, particularly farmers. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has also launched Kisan Card. We are going to talk about all these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Amir Zafar Tutani Saab, who is President of Re-Energia, focuses on economics and has been associated with international donor agencies for quite some time. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And then on Skype, we are joined by Dr. Abid Salari Saab, who is a member of Prime Minister's Economic Coordination Committee, Coordination Committee, Advisory Committee, and also head of SDPI. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. The third guest who joins us from Karachi is M. Sharik Vora, who is President of Karachi Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, Vora sir, for being part of the program as well. Let me start with the studio. Ahmed Tutani sir, let me ask you about the state of economy and what needs to be done in the next budget.
Thank you very much, sir. I thought you were going to give this heavy task to Abid, but you know, I'm happy to start. I think fundamentally speaking, we have seen, I think if you had listened to Waqar Masood Saab just yesterday and the day before, what we are seeing here is fundamentally that we may actually outdo our estimated growth rate. That's kind of the news that's doing the rounds, right? Why is that primarily? That is primarily because of not only that we have controlled the macro mostly, but fundamentally the agricultural gods, if you may call it, Allah has been very kind to us this year. So whether you look at rice, whether you look at expected wheat crop, then you look at large-scale manufacturing, which basically is a kind of a spin-off from the construction policy and what was done last year in terms of COVID reaction, right? So what are we looking at? We're looking at possibly a 4% growth this year, which given 3 waves of pandemic, I think is a fantabulous figure, right? We're also seeing some interesting rise in exports, right? So overall, the deficit is not looking as bleak as one would have thought, because, you know, with growth of the construction sector, the imports have picked up. But the imports picking up is also a good sign, because it's some of the intermediate materials. We talked about this in your last program, picking up. So I think overall, with the economy the way it is right now, I think where the government should go, just a one quick macro statement, and then maybe back to you. The macro statement is that this is not a time for frivolous spending.
Okay.
This is a time for consolidation.
Okay.
And basically, given that the sun gods have smiled, that Allah has been kind, I think we need to think about that. And so the budget is going to be a very important part of it.
I see that you are, you know, trying to please both monotheism and pantheism simultaneously. But here's a point that needs to be made. Especially the finance minister actually pointed out that our arrangement with IMF regarding the the prices or the cost of electricity is something that has been harming Pakistan. And while the rest of the world is being given a lot of relief, the conditions for the country are really dire at this moment. Do you think that there will be some, conducive response from IMF?
I think overall, globally speaking, looking at how Ma'am Kristalina has done, around the world, and what the signals we've received from the local mission, we understand that yes, there is going to be a little bit kind of looking away at the deficit number. Okay. Right? We may get a little bit relief on the ceiling, but overall, I think how that relief is looked at, it will depend on how we frame the next 3 years of budget. Yeah? How they see us. Are we going back into an infrastructure craze, or are we going to solidify more on side of the social sectors? Are we giving out, how are we getting rid of the kind of unrequited kind of subsidies versus targeted subsidies? So all this is going to be
and that's a big question. I'm going to come back to you. Let me go to Sharik Bora Saab, because I'm told that we lost a contact with Dr. Abid Qayyum Sidlari. We will be trying to get in touch again. Sharik Bora Saab, your take on the state of economy, and what are your expectations from the next budget, sir?
Thank you very much, Pitafi, for asking my views. Our economy at the moment is vulnerable, is not stable, actually speaking, but we have positive indicators. Exports are just maintaining what we have been exporting for last many years. Probably our exports would end around $24 billion, and that is what we have been achieving in last many years. Local industry, large-scale manufacturing, construction, automobile, these are some of the sectors where we can say that the local demand, domestic demand has picked up, and for next few years, if this continues, I am confident that economy will be stable.
All right.
Regarding the budget, we are hopeful. We had a discussion with our new Finance Minister, Mr. Shaukat Tareen, just the day before yesterday, and he assured that there will be a drastic out-of-box solutions for Pakistan's regressive taxation system. And that is where actually we need to focus, because our economy hasn't been growing because of the taxation system. Our industry has not picked up because of the regressive taxation system. Our international trade has not picked up because of regressive taxation system. Government has no option but to rely on the existing taxpayers. They have to squeeze them to meet their targets, which is of course not a great policy. So the budget has to be focused on different dimensions, and of those diversity, I think the taxation should be the focus, because
and hang on, sir. That's a very good point. But let me ask you, what specifically to improve in the tax structure and revenue collection? I mean, I understand that there is need for rationalization, but what are the specific ideas that you are going to actually present here?
Our Federal Board of Revenue machinery, all these bureaucrats are very, very competent, learned and hardworking. But actually the policy which they make, or the policy which our finance ministry or the political government actually is not clear. The focus should be to find out the new taxpayers. That is the agenda we need. I mean, we should focus on this agenda so greatly that this should be our main agenda, main focus, because internal revenues must increase. Now, you have asked me how to do it. So, we have 4.5 million industrial connections in this country. And you know how many of those are our registered sales tax entities? Just a few. Similarly, there are millions and millions of people who buy cars. There are millions and millions of people who buy so many other capital goods, and our taxpayer directory is very small. Similarly, we have...
I understand that bit. My question was particularly about the things that you might actually not like in taxation, right? Expanding tax base is important. Nobody argues with that. At this moment, one has to actually ask what about the particular taxes that are there, which part can be done away with, how to actually provide relief to the business class so that these issues actually can generate economic activity.
All right. You see, first of all, our sales tax at 17% base rate is too expensive, is too big, is too high for the new people to step in and become a sales tax registered person. In a country where the existing people who are in the sales tax net, we have told this to the finance minister, Mr. Tareen, and to the last minister also, that 90% of the goods which are produced are sold through flying invoices. FBR knows about this. Finance minister knows about this. So what to do? How those 90% flying invoices should be real invoices, should be issued to those industries who are consuming the raw material is to reduce the rate first of all.
Right, right. But once again, right, Boras Sahab, allow me to actually come back to the studio. Let me ask Amit Tuptani Sahab, particularly about tax structure, especially taxes, right? I understand that there are a lot of attempts to evade taxes, and then there is tax fraud in this country as well. But when you talk about the overall architecture of how taxes are built, what are the areas which need rationalization or correction? I understand that when it comes to GST, one has to go for the VAT mode. Never happens, right? But regarding the overall taxes, how to improve them?
Well, I think first is a very important question, and I think that Boras Sahab has given you the business side's view, right? Yeah. I'm going to give you the view of revenue side, right? So let's forget upon, and let's not call it tax for a second. Let's call it that the government needs a certain amount of revenue. Okay. Let's then understand how are we collecting this revenue. When we start looking at that, we realize that we are missing two very important tiers of revenue collection. One is the municipal tier, and the second is the provincial tier. We literally feed the province of more than half of our revenue collection, and they make less than and Punjab is ahead of the game, 5% tax effort if you look at their total expenditures, right? Okay. So, but if you look at where the tax...
You're focusing on NFC right now? No, that's why you're saying that we feed them...
Yeah, that's why I said, let's forget for a second this whole diatribe about FBR versus this, versus taxpayer 2 million, versus how many registered connections and all that. That's a very scientific method, I agree with that, but that's a very federal outlook. Okay. Right? The federal, after the 15th Amendment, and if you realistically look at how the world works, and let's take America, most of our illuminated bureaucracy is American educated, right? So what happens in the States? The States, I mean, the federal tax system is only income-based, right? And that goes directly into two areas, defense and into research. Right? That's it. Bottom line, plus a little bit of infrastructure. Where does all the money come from? Where the states of the United States of America, like the provinces of the United Province of Pakistan, I mean, it is, we don't do anything there. There is no effort. Whether you look at agri level, whether you look at city level. So basically the first effort that has to be made is to wean off the provinces, right? Because now the question is, yeah, the province is going to say, oh, it's going to take us a while to get our machinery in place. No, but I think what is going to happen is also ask the province, is what we give them being spent efficiently? No. Right? So I think that this whole question of how do we get more money in the kitty, I think we need to stop looking at the consolidated fund alone. Because if you look at what makes up the consolidated fund, I mean, primarily then you're stuck with border taxes. Look at other things, right?
Yeah, so, but here we are talking at this moment of provinces and local level actually levying more taxes, or you're talking about shifting collection powers from the center to the provinces?
Well, look, no. Taxes are of many kinds, right? As an individual, because I carry the passport of Pakistan, the Federation has to levy a tax. And what is that tax for? Remember, before you levy a tax, you have to also tell the taxpayer what are you taxing him or her for. So our security, now remember, the internal security is provincial responsibility, right? So the province should collect and deliver. They don't. They get a transfer, right? So look at the security of Pakistan. For me, for citizenship, my sovereignty lies with the federal government, so I pay an income tax. That's fine. The rest of the taxation needs to move down the ladder. Just Islamabad alone, read the paper on what we lose by simply not collecting parking fees in Islamabad. 4.7 billion rupees a month.
Yeah, but
right.
Since you brought up the example,
so I'm not talking about extra taxation.
Since you mentioned US, if you remember all that Tea Party revolution and everything, that was taxation without representation will not work. And local governments don't have a local government there.
So I'm just saying, look, we start with the provinces. Let me just give you one other fact. I think Vora Sahib will vouch for this, that 80% of Pakistan's tax is indirect, right? So the Federal Board of Revenue collects 20% of tax off. I mean, it is just a criminal act. I mean, 20%, just give it to me and Vora Sahib and we'll collect 20% for the government, right? But there's a malfunction in the way the federal tax structure is structured. And the last thing you said, what to do in the budget, I think one thing we are missing. From a business perspective, lower the weighted average tariff of Pakistan. Bring it down to 3%. Just see what happens to the tax collection. Because we rely too much. This year, 30 to 40%. Again, we are relying on border taxes. This is unfair. How will business work?
Right. Vora Sahib, if you want to come in and add to what was said, you can, sir. Particularly, my question was regarding the tax rates. Do you think that the current slabs are okay, or there should be some improvement? And while everybody agrees that indirect taxes should be discouraged and the direct taxation should be improved, that doesn't seem to be happening for quite some time. We keep on talking about automation, we keep on talking about software introduction. If I don't want to pay, who's going to make me pay, sir?
What I thought was that we are trying to discuss just the federal taxation system. But I think my friend has actually enlarged the scope of the discussion by bringing in taxation at different other tiers, that is provincial and municipal. So I would like to keep myself, strictly to the federal taxation system, because that is the taxation system which needs to be improved first. And that is the area where most of the chunk of the taxes we will actually collect in next many years. Because our provincial taxation system and municipal taxation system I know Sindh has been trying to improve. I don't know much about Punjab, but yes, Sindh government has made a lot of digitization in their tax collection portals they have come up with. But let's keep our discussion first confined to the federal taxation, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
because Pakistan's industry is still not devolved fully to the provinces, it's still a federal subject. Unfortunately, the federal government hasn't been able to come up with a industrial policy in last 3 years. Not this government, but even the last government couldn't give us an industrial policy. This is, of course, very sad. Like my friend said, that 70 or 80% of the taxes actually we collect, and that is the withholding tax. 67% of the federal revenue taxes we collect on behalf of the federal government, pay to their kitty, and then face harassment. You see, this is the height of faulty taxation system that my members and my business community is actually collecting agent for the government of Pakistan. We collect 67%, and instead that they should incentivize my effort to collect taxes for them, they actually punish me. So this mindset has to be changed. We have to become a positive collector of taxes. We must realize that once the existing taxpayers are incentivized, so they become a role model for those who don't want to come into the tax system. This is the out-of-box solution we have suggested to this government. We had suggested to the previous government. What is wrong with the political governments is that they are afraid of bringing in the policies, and it is the political will which needs to be improved. They, for first 2.5, 3 years, they try to enforce a political will and a good taxation system. They are not able to be successful. They go back, and then the stereotype taxation system takes place, and then IMF. So we are in a situation where one has to take bold decisions.
Right. But
they
regarding
should not be afraid
incentives
of
being
taking,
provided by the government of Pakistan, the biggest problem is for past 20 years, since I have actually covered the budget, the argument is the same. And the government always promises that it is going to provide a lot of incentives and encouragement. And we saw during the last days of PMLN, there was an attempt to declare assets as well. This government also actually encouraged that. But that doesn't seem to be working. There is one aspect. But I have to actually move away from the revenue collection, and I have to look at the other headers where money might be lost. One, circular debt. The second one is public sector enterprises. Do you think that Pakistan has found that magic bullet to kill the monster, or we haven't? Why not?
Well, I think the answer has already been provided by Voda Saab. The unfortunate truth, and I'll add to that, not any government in Pakistan, be it political or non-political, has had the will. I mean, in our life, at least since the 60s, I can tell you that none of the, barring some of the 80s government, I don't want to name them, but, even the last attempt at a non-political government, they didn't do much either. So basically, what is going wrong? So I think fundamentally, and I'll stick again, thanks to Voda Saab, to the federal level, right? Okay. So this is a federal problem.
You can talk about other things as well. It's okay. So it was his choice.
So your first question on the circular debt, right?
Yeah.
So actually, number one, this is a power sector debt. There's nothing circular about it. It's basically what I call a telescopic debt, which as you move away from the import of fuel, it keeps expanding till it gets to CPPAG and the final, and then you have to look at what the reflow is coming in terms of collection. Now, there is a stock and there is a flow issue in the circular debt, right? But not wanting to bore everybody, forget that and just look at what is it made up of. So of the total, I mean, a third or more is from the government's own debt to itself.
Okay.
So now think about this. I do something in accounting now that I'm back in business. You move money from here to this company, to this company, blah, blah. So the government is moving wooden dollars. So a third or more, I think it's slightly more than third, of this debt is government's own GenCos owing the government
Okay.
Oh, come on, you can't fix that? I'll
No, hang
immediately.
on. But,
hold on.
But you realize pricing might be a...
This is not. This has got nothing to do with pricing. This is something you can brush under the carpet for as long. Sindh government did it in 2001 in Musharraf era. We helped, when I was in the World Bank, do that with Hafiz Sheikh as the finance minister. So let's not, I'm just talking facts of, because you asked me what I would do in a government.
Right.
It's a temporary measure. I know it's not. You do it every year to National Highway Authority. The Nawaz Sharif government does. Do you know how much the National Highway Authority alone owes the government while they pretend that they don't get budget? I mean, it is just fantabulous. So your first question on this is, there is CPEC element, which is new added power sector debt. There is the GENCOs, which are government that are being given back. And then obviously there is the IPP issue. And, I don't want to talk about that because Vora Saab is here. I don't want to sort of be on the bad side of business.
Right.
So I'm just going to not mention...
bill as well?
No. So, yeah, forget that. I'm just saying, look at what are you owing. So there is also, there is a capacity payment issue. And then there is the actual payment issue. Right? So of the 1.2 or 6, wherever we are now, trillion, it gets so quickly that I'm losing track. There is a big chunk, more than 600 billion, which is capacity payments. Right? So you can actually at least get it off the books for the government part. So that's one starter, and there are many other ways of doing this. They are already parking some stock under a government stock debt, this are basically under the Pakistan Power Company. On the issue of the SOEs, now, there are two stories around the SOEs. The government always pats itself on the back and says, hey, it's only 300 to 400 billion that I lose with SOEs. Now, if you trust Hafiz Pasha, and Pasha Saab is very senior to us, or respected, I normally don't agree, but I agree with his numbers. And his last number given to the government is 700 billion. Wow. This is what the main PSCs are costing us, right? So if you are real, what's keeping you from shutting some of this down? I mean, we do a simple analysis that
like PIA?
Exactly. If we
shut down PIA?
No. We shut down PIA because we have other flag carriers. Please remember, we have SEAL, we have Air Blue, we have, these are all Pakistani flag carriers, right? So we shut down PIA and we give all these people, the 38,000 people, we keep them at home, multiplied by 7 per family, and we pay them every year. Their salary is what they're earning. We will still be profitable.
Right. So, government of Pakistan actually gives away whatever advantage it had in keeping a company and keeps on paying the
No. You are not getting it. It doesn't give it back anything. So we pay for all their follies. So the idea is, if somebody is working, right, you pay their salaries, plus you have to pay for what they work on, which is all the op cost. So we call it the above rail cost, right, in the case of railways. So if you look at the aircraft cost on this, at least that gets shut down. So the sunk cost of the government goes down tremendously. I am talking as a finance person.
But all these things again go back to the political will issue. And I'm not merely talking about the government of Pakistan, opposition, of course. This budget has to be passed from the parliament, and you have People's Party, which always sides with the Labour, which is a fact.
Well, you have the People's Party's finance minister sitting in the government again. So I think he should be able to convince you.
Hang on. When you were working for World Bank and when you are working for the energy, you are not wearing the same cap, right? At this moment, it is a different position. You will not be actually using that kind of worldview to actually solve your economic issues right now.
That was a very good one, Farrukh. I'll shut up.
No, with due respect. But Vora Saab, once again, these two issues, circular debt, because it is quite a prominent one, and the finance minister says that without actually doing away with the subsidies or actually increasing the power sector bills or pricing, he can take care of the circular debt. There are ways to do it. The second thing is public sector enterprises. Your input on that, sir?
My input on state-owned enterprises is a bit different because if we say we are living in a state, then state has a responsibility, and that responsibility is to govern things nicely. If PIA or steel mill or other state-owned enterprises were not governed professionally, that doesn't mean it's fault of the people. It's the fault of those who were running the country. It's the government, it's the governance, it's the state. You see, you can't, for a state, everything is not business. Everything is not balance sheet. Everything is not profit and loss. You have to give employment to the people. You have
And services. Yeah.
and services, and you have to look after your people's health, their education, their well-being, their happiness. That doesn't mean if you are losing some money on the balance sheet, you stop doing that. No, this is not right. You see, every state, every country has two different modes of governance. So you have to look for all these things. I think steel mill or PIA, even if the PIA is sold to a Pakistani conglomerate, supposedly, Safi, it would be me and you who will manage PIA. So that means the same people, the same country will manage. The only thing different will be the manager, and that is the governance. So we must try to improve the governance. I think this nation has that capacity to do things right. This was the PIA which was working under Noor Khan, and it was a miracle airline. This was steel mill, it was making money. And still there's, autonomous bodies like OGDC, PPL, they are making billions. I think we can have a model of governance, a corporate model of governance, which should, where we can probably avoid selling these great assets for peanuts like we did for banking.
Right.
Now,
Right.
coming...
Bora Sahab, since you were talking about actually not privatizing these institutions, actually let me remind you that the proposal that came from this studio was particularly about shutting them down. So there's a difference. But at this moment, Tani Sahab quickly wants to come in. If you want to comment on
Exactly
what
on
was
this,
said, and then I'll go.
so, coming with your example, let me say I follow your theology. What will I do? Let me introduce 5 new government-run cotton mills and cotton textile things so that, your argument, because there they shout at everything the government does.
Okay.
So what if we bring them in? Secondly, the basic issue is, it's a question of how many people do you feed. In the case of PIA being there, we did a very simple analysis which basically said that if you send 38,000 people home, you could actually support a lot many more Pakistanis by simply distributing that money that these people are sitting on and are actually earning. You could support that 30 times more Pakistani people. Simple, very simple equation. You see, because these people are not just making the money on salaries, they're also imposing rents. They are getting in the way of other private sector. So, Varasab, you had actually left. I don't know if you heard what I said. If we go, let me bring in new companies, state-owned enterprises in the cotton sector. Let's see how Aptama reacts to that, going by your argument. So, I don't think that's the...
Right. But Varasab, let me actually include a little bit of my own pessimism. I mean, governmental improvement and corporate governance is something that we have been hearing for 20, 30 years. But somehow, PIA, Railway of Pakistan, they keep on losing money. And we are not merely talking about these, institutions. Pakistan Steel Mill usually stays put doing nothing. So is there a possibility that the government can divest from these assets?
Actually, it's a point of view. It's an argument. I wouldn't insist that my analysis of state-owned enterprises handling is right or wrong, but it's a point of view. You see, everything has to be analyzed in a long-term perspective. Supposedly, if we close down all these institutions and we try to bring in new companies, rest assured we will give them at least 10-20 years of tax exemptions. We will give them 10-20 years of duty-free imports so that they are able to stabilize their businesses and grow. My point of view is that there should be a mix and match way of handling things, of solutions. One is to give some of the institutions to the competent people, try to improve, because we have this asset for a very, very long time. Now, there are private airlines which are competing. We, as a big airline, we can probably compete much better than a new airline who has just come in because of its vast assets, of its infrastructure, of its know-how about the business, everything. Yes, there are small businesses, maybe cotton textile mills or a ginning factory is not government's job. But you see, even today in Scandinavia or in France, there are 50-60% of their high-tech and their large manufacturing is still in the hands of the state, and they are very successful.
Right.
I think that Pakistan's current economic situation to handle these state-owned enterprises, improve their governance, probably would be less costly as compared to coming up or selling these. You know, whenever we have sold our
That's an interesting
national
point of view,
assets,
by the way.
whenever Pitafi have sold our national assets, believe me, 90% of those assets were sold because of their real estate value. They were never commissioned again for the purpose for which they were sold.
Right. But
if
sir,
you have
there are good examples as well. For example, the privatization of banks. That
And
was
PTCL.
PTCL was a difficult kind of
But
example.
it still worked.
But banks actually bought the entire industry, right?
Did we ever privatize the banks? We just gave them government credit. I mean, no.
Let us not
It's a good service. I agree with you.
Okay. Let us not go into the nitty and gritty right now. Let me ask you about another important thing. I understand that agriculture and when it comes to health, these are basically provincial subjects, right? But given that the federal government gives a framework in the budget and the country keeps on facing two crises right now. One is, of course, the poor getting poorer because of the pandemic and the economic situation. Agriculture needs a shot in the arm. And the second one is healthcare, because of the pandemic itself. Do you think that in this budget, the federal government should be focusing more on these sectors and investing or laying some policy ground rules that can help the provincial governments?
Look, what the government needs to do in agriculture and both in agriculture and health, the federal government, again, sticking to federal. I've been told to stick to federal. So basically, the federal government. No, I'm just joking. So basically, federal government has two roles to play here. The first one is to encourage more research and modernization. That they will send. This is called the nudge. So you go with the Thal's theory. Basically, this nudging is required. That they said because they can't really do anything, right? Because all these subjects are at the provincial level, right? So number one, they set the standards. They basically introduce and make it easy to bring in new research, to bring in new technology. So what do? Because they control the border tariffs, they lower tariffs on all things that relate to these sectors, right? That's the first thing. And it requires no money, to be very honest. There's going to be little dent, but you'll find out that it will be more than amply made up in the income and in the other taxes, right? The second thing that needs to be done is to basically provide a vision. Right? Where do you want Pakistan's agriculture to go? And I think one of the biggest things we've lost because of the way we've treated CPEC is, we forgot the 8th pillar in CPEC, which is agriculture. And I think we could have done so much more have we focused on that and made that CPEC vision on agriculture our vision for the next 5-10 years, we'd be in a much better space.
But at this moment, maybe it was said that
so this doesn't need budget.
Second phase of CPEC essentially focuses on farming, and the government of Pakistan is working with China, but it is a slow rolling ball, and it will take some time. Is it not true?
No, that's true. But please understand. So your question was, what does the federal government do? The federal government basically is not doing what it should be doing. It should be taking CPEC by the hand and saying, here is my vision. It needs to get that. And then it's CPEC, like, for example, let's look at the Sahiwal coal fire park. The reason it was done is because the government held the hands of the two private sectors, Hornex Shandan Rui and the government of Punjab and said, hey, marry each other and get this done in 9 months. It got done in 9 months. What the government hasn't done here is really say, this is my state agriculture policy. I want to get into these fields. Here is where I'll use X amount of GMO. I will not use GMO. Here is the technology I want to China, and then let the provinces run with it.
Right. And since you began by focusing on R&D, and you said that allow the imports of the irrelevant technology and stuff, do you think that the SRO infrastructure can be rationalized that quickly? Because usually whenever we import something, I remember General Pervez Musharraf's time when we allowed the computers to be, second-hand computers to be imported, and it actually built up the call center economy and so many other things. But do you think that at this moment the way SROs are actually placed above each other, and the government of Pakistan concerns about current account deficit, that is going to happen in coming days?
No, I think this is absolutely going to happen. Okay. And I think, but let me change that. It can absolutely happen, despite the SRO culture. Okay. But will it happen? I don't know, because I don't see in the budget this thing talk about. I mean, the government's still gloating about LSM increasing in COVID and everything. I mean, the government needs to look forward 10 years, right? Okay. So that the junior governments, which is the states, the provinces, they need to come up and say, oh, we need this. So, honestly, technology getting in second-hand, first-hand, I think the biggest problem we are having here is, even on the research side, the recent HEC amendment, that's caused a big problem.
Right.
Because everything you want to import technology, people say, hey, we should make it ourselves. Yeah. So we're going to wait 10 years and get poorer until we wait. I mean, there's a very logical argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Vora Sahab, same question to you, sir. Agriculture, healthcare, infrastructure, what can the federal government do? But I am told that we have to conclude the program. Let it be your concluding remarks, sir.
All right. Thank you. My take on agriculture policy is that we have actually lost a lot of our agricultural producers. From an agricultural country, we are now an importing country. We import cotton, we import lentils, we import sugar, everything, small, big, even we import food luxuries like cheese and sausages and everything. So we are no more an agricultural country. We must improve our agriculture. Government should try to focus on good quality of seeds, number one. Number two, the biggest problem is the big landlords are no more interested in agriculture. They just sit in the assemblies, they give their lands to the poor, illiterate, incompetent farmers who make a very, very small amount for themselves and a big amount for their landlords, everywhere. Mostly in Sindh and Punjab, it's 50-50% basis. If I have a 500 acres of land, I give it to the haris, to the farmers, they cultivate it, and because they are not educated, they haven't gone to the agricultural university, so the yield we are getting from these lands is just peanuts. What I would like to propose to the government is that there should be a penalty on the landowners that if they are not increasing the yield, if they are not increasing their productivity, their land holdings will be slashed or they will be penalized. Only then the mechanized farming will take place. Only then the graduates from the agricultural university will go to the farmlands. So
Right. Vora Sahab, I'm told that we have actually run out of time, but that's a very intriguing suggestion. If you want to, introduce one-liner, Durrani Sahab, please do, conclusion. But this idea of actually slashing private property if you don't produce, yields, high yields, that seems revolutionary, doesn't it?
It does. I have no
revolutionary.
Revolutionary is the last statement.
But you're
I think the government, as I said in the very beginning, my concluding statement on today's discussion is the government needs to be forward-looking and needs to take some risks in the last 2.5 years rather than trying to consolidate its position. It should consolidate the economy.
Right. On that positive note, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Amir Zafar Durrani Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. M. Sharik Boda Sahab, thank you very much for your precious time as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. The budget will be introduced very soon in the Parliament. But regarding the economy, I have to actually point out something that I keep on pointing out, and that is, if you want really the economy of Pakistan to produce some impact, then you'll have to start paying attention to the economy as well. I talk particularly about my own profession. How many channels are there to focus on economy? How many people or intellectuals are even bothered to talk about economy? At this moment, when you talk about these matters, in most discussions on television, the overall input is next to nil, right? I'm not talking about these programs. These are niche programs. But when you talk about the mainstream Urdu press, there the space for economy is shrinking. And because of that, perhaps your national narrative and your national discourse have actually been badly affected. Let us focus on economic matters and hope that not only economy, but the capacity to focus on economy also improves. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.